My credit card gets it, and everything is keyed off what's called bank rate. It goes all the way through the system, and it tends to be, we do see consumer interest rates on mortgage rates, credit card debt. We tend to see that go up pretty quickly. We don't tend to see it come down. It's stickier on the way down.
The Prime Minister's critics say his first 100 days in office have been marked by Tory sleaze scandals and a staggering economy. Rishi Sunak's under pressure to reveal what he knew about bullying allegations against Dominic Raab and Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs. His time as Prime Minister has also been blighted by continued industrial action and the cost of living crisis. Leon Emirali, former aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, told us Mr Sunak's performance to date has been average.
I think he's got a solid C. I don't think he's done anything particularly remarkable. I don't think he's had a catastrophe. He has steadied the ship from that short-term economic shock after Liz Truss's mini-budget. I don't think he's necessarily weak, but that's the perception that's out there, and that's what Labour are running with. And in politics, once an idea is being seeded, it's very hard to shake that.
The Royal College of Nursing says A&E waiting times have risen dramatically since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. It claims over 10,000 additional patients regularly wait over 12 hours for treatment every month. Today, the RCN will deliver a petition to Downing Street calling for fair pay for nursing staff. It's received more than 110,000 signatures so far. Households in England and Wales will see their water bills rise by 7.5% from April. Industry body Water UK says customers will pay an average of £31 more compared to last year. The annual bill for an average household will hit £448. That's the biggest increase in almost 20 years. And around 2.3 million households missed an essential payment last month, including mortgages, rent and credit cards. That's according to new data. According to consumer organisation Which, 59% of people had to either cut back on essentials, sell property or dip into savings to cover spending. It's calling on essential businesses, including energy providers, to do more to help customers. Shell says its profits have increased by more than 53%, with earnings of more than £68 billion last year. It's the company's highest profit in its 115-year history. The energy giants benefited from soaring oil prices due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It comes as consumers continue to grapple with soaring energy costs. And Ofgem says it will launch an urgent investigation into British Gas after claims debt collectors hired by the company broke into customers' homes to install prepayment meters. The decision comes after a sting by the Times newspaper. An undercover journalist accompanied debt collectors who reportedly entered the homes of vulnerable people to force-fit prepayment meters. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says he's horrified by the report. The Health Secretary says England is set to be one of the first countries in the world to wipe out hepatitis B. It comes as the World Health Organization says transmission of Hep B from mothers to their children has effectively been eliminated in England. The latest data shows infections now stand at just 0.1%. More than £400 million has been donated to UK charities to help people in Ukraine since the conflict began. The United Nations says the Disasters Emergency Committee has become the biggest charity donor to the response inside Ukraine and helping refugees in neighbouring countries. The DEC brings together 15 leading UK aid charities at times of crisis overseas to raise funds quickly. And King Charles won't feature on Australia's new $5 banknote, the country's central bank has announced. The current image is of a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, but the new design will pay tribute instead to the culture and history of Indigenous Australians. The Reserve Bank of Australia says it will take a number of years to design and print the new notes. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Bev.
today on GB News TV and DAB radio. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. Interest rates are predicted to rise to 4% today, their highest level since the 2008 financial crash. This means a further squeeze on mortgage holders and businesses. But good news, of course, for savers. The move would be the Bank of England's 10th consecutive rate increase. GB News business and economics editor Liam Halligan will be here in just a moment. Rishi Sunak reaches 100 days in office today with his premiership plagued by strike action and ministerial scandals. New polling puts Labour 20 points ahead of the Tories, with the majority of people saying that the Prime Minister is doing a bad job. What do you think? And I'll be joined by Dr Renee Hoendekamp and the former Labour MP Stephen Pound to discuss the big topics of the day, including a shocking new report on the front page of the Times today about British Gas force-fitting prepayment meters. You do not want to miss that. And of course, this show is nothing without you and your views. Don't forget to vote in the poll on Twitter. This morning, I am asking you, with Rishi Sunak being our Prime Minister for 100 days today, does he deserve another 100 days in power? So far, 70% of you say that he does not deserve it. Let me know why. Email me gbviews@gbnews.uk to have your say. So at midday today, the Bank of England is predicted to deliver its 10th interest rate rise in a row, likely bringing it to 4%. The move will be a continuation of the quickest series of hikes for more than 30 years. So with me now in the studio to break it all down is Liam Halligan. Why are they doing this, Liam? Give me the idiot's guide.
You're not an idiot, Bev.
Treat me like I'm an idiot.
And our GB News viewers and listeners certainly aren't idiots. So the Bank of England's raised interest rates 9 times in a row now because it's trying to bear down on inflation. It's trying to push inflation down by pretty much deliberately slowing down the economy, making it harder for people to borrow money, harder for demand to expand in order to try and keep those price rises under control and rein in the cost of living crisis. In the years before the COVID pandemic, interest rates were below 1%. They then went even lower during the period of lockdown, so 1/4 and they've since gone up 9 successive times. There's the graph there. We can see the COVID lockdown if you're watching on television, 1/4. Then there's those 9 successive rises to tackle inflation to 3.5% where we are now. I expect to rise to 4%. I'll be at the Bank of England at 12 noon when that decision is made to report that up to the minute. But I actually think interest rates haven't got that much further to go up. I've been long predicting an interest rate peak of 4.25%, 4.25% later this spring.
This is what I don't understand. Normally, we have inflation because there's so much monetary and economic activity going on. People are buying. There's a lot of money sloshing around the system and it gets hot and they try to cool it down, right? That's not what's happening now. No one's spending it. Well, what we are spending has so little value. But people are being careful with their money right now. We don't have much spare disposable income. So why are they doing this?
Inflation this time round is multifaceted. It's not only because there has been a kind of wall of post-lockdown demand. There was a surge of demand. There is actually still very, very strong demand, but that hit a kind of wall of, it hit like a sort of limits on supply. So the global economy couldn't supply what people were demanding because of all those lockdown supply chain issues. Production needed to be rebooted. Here in the UK in particular, we've had a lot of people not going back to work. The whole economy is discombobulated. And then on top of that, the Bank of England has also spent those years since the global financial crisis of 2008, massively expanding what we call its balance sheet, so-called quantitative easing. That's also inflationary, so the bank's got to rein that in as well. Look, inflation is now coming down. We've gone from over 11 to just over 10%. I think the next inflation number, when it comes out for January, will be in single digits. There's still a long way to go until we get down to the 2% inflation target that the government sets for the Bank of England. But I do think by the middle of the year and towards the back end of this year, we're going to see inflation of around 5% or so. And that will allow the Bank of England to say, look, it's come down all this way. It's obviously coming down. We can now start to lower interest rates again in order to try and give the economy a bit of a boost and give people a break, frankly.
When Rishi Sunak set out his 5-point plan just a few weeks ago, that involved bringing down inflation. And he basically staked a claim to take credit for that when it happens. Will he be able to take
It's a bit like saying in January, oh, it's going to be sunnier than January and June and it will all be because of me. I mean, look, it's almost an arithmetic inevitability that inflation will come down because the big price rises of last year kind of drop out of the numbers because inflation is about, rates of change rather than actual levels. So I do think he'll hit that target. But it's going to be very difficult to get inflation down from around 5% or so down to the 2%, which is the Bank of England's target. I think that will take at least until the middle of next year. But I do think this cost of living squeeze is going to abate, even though, we know it's still really hitting lots of people. Yeah. And look, today, Shell's just announced £32 billion of profits.
You read my mind.
That's, globally, but still in the UK, they're making a lot of money. We're seeing oil prices come down. We're seeing now wholesale gas prices come down, yet still petrol and diesel prices are high. And, of course, utility bills are very high as well.
I was thinking about you this morning when I was reading this, Liam.
Always wise.
I often think about you when I come across these financial stories and I think, what would the oracle of all things economics think of this? We were talking about the fact that all of these utility companies have we upped our direct debits, right, to meet these increasing prices. Then the prices come down and people have been really careful and used less. So British Gas have a lot of our cash. Is that why Centrica, who own British Gas, have now said that they will have £1 billion of cash on its balance sheet for this year, and that has put their share price up to make them the top riser of the FTSE 100? Is that because of us lending them our money?
They'll probably deny it, but I would say eyeballing from outside, their current accounts haven't yet been published. They're published with the delay, of course, like all company accounts. But it does seem as if that's the case. That's how strongly I'd put it. A lot of these utility companies, they are taking cash from us. We're in a situation now where the government cap is about to be adjusted. And yet, even though wholesale prices have come down a lot, they're now, for gas, below where they were before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine just under a year ago. And yet utility bills are sky high, far higher than they were before last February. So I think the market isn't working properly. Again, the utility companies would deny this. I would suggest that the market is rigged. We're getting a lot of cheaper, heavily subsidised but cheaper renewable energy coming through now. And yet it's still... we're charged for that renewable energy as if it was gas-fired energy. Yes. So it's almost as if the market doesn't work. And it's not just households, Bev, it's companies. There's going to be no price cap for almost all companies after April. I was in Kent earlier this week. Yeah. We showed the report that I did. And you got a guy there, family-run business. He's trying to run a pub, gastro pub. They're all in, all their savings. They've got some nice rooms, weekends away and so on. It's called the Dog at Wingham. Mark Bridgen's utility bills have gone up from 30 grand a year for his pub and restaurant before the war in Ukraine. And now they're 80 grand a year, right? What an increase with the price cap. When the price cap goes in April, 120 grand a year. On utility bills, a 4 times increase. No small business can withstand that. The government needs to understand what's happening to small and medium-sized enterprises, not the heavy energy users like steel makers. They will get additional subsidies, but just regular businesses for whom a utility bill was a kind of small part of their cost base is now the looming hole in the middle of their balance sheets that will crush these firms.
It really just feels... I know it's not deliberate to close these small businesses, but it just looks like an act of national self-harm at the moment.
Or neglect. It's neglect, isn't it? Small businesses, SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, as I often champion here on GBNews and in my other writing, they employ 2/3 of us, right? They generate half our growth. They are the hotbeds of innovation, effort and drive. These are the companies that push the British economy forward.
We are a nation of shopkeepers,
right? We are. And it's a cliche, but it's true. Yeah. We're retailers, we're innovators, we're potterers, if you like. These small companies, they don't only provide world-class services, they're also where a lot of innovation happens. Yeah. So many of them were monstered during lockdown, absolutely ravaged during the COVID pandemic. For a lot of these self-employed people, no furlough for them. So they suffered.
Yeah.
They kept their workforces on in many cases, and they're desperate now to get back in the saddle and get this British economy moving. They're being hit by business rates, which they have to pay, even if they don't make any money at all. They're about to be walloped by a 6 percentage point rise in corporation tax from 19 to 25%, something which I think Rishi Sunak should freeze in his March budget, by the way.
Yes.
And I'm sort of campaigning for that in my own quiet and retiring and shy way. But these SME businesses, ministers have to understand that they drive the economy and they are very, very influential swing voters in their own communities. They're pragmatic. They don't care who they vote for.
Yeah.
They vote for what's best for business. And it's clear that many of them now are suffering.
OK. All right. Thank you so much, Liam. Right, there's not a lot of good news there, is there? Don't forget to vote in our Twitter poll. This morning I'm asking you, with Rishi Sunak being our Prime Minister for 100 days today, do you think that he deserves another 100 days in power? Cast your vote now and let me know your reasons below, won't you? Also, email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, because after the break, a shocking story. An undercover journalist accompanied debt collectors sent by British gas owner Centrica, I just mentioned them, to force-fit prepayment meters on vulnerable people. Before we get into that, though, time for a quick break. See you in 2.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good morning, welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. My guests are here this morning. I'm delighted to be joined by NHS Dr Renee Hoenderkamp and former Labour MP Stephen Pound. Welcome, both of you. Right, let's start with the Times. This is the front page of the paper today. It's a brilliant investigation by a journalist called Paul Morgan Bentley, and he went to the lengths of applying for a job with the debt collection agencies that British Gas use and following them around, and basically discovered that there have been over 300,000 warrants, court warrants, to break into the homes of vulnerable people, Renee, to fit these prepayment meters. It's genuinely a shocking insight into what's been going on in relation to this huge corporation and these individuals.
I think it's really interesting, Bev, that it's on a day where Shell announced a £32 billion profit as well. So there's clearly plenty of money in the system to help vulnerable people. Yes. And obviously this should not be happening. People should not be in a situation where they might not be able to heat their home with their children in it because they can't put £1 in the meter, or should we say £100 into the meter.
Yeah.
I mean, we do need, on the balance of this, we do need to make sure that we have a safety net for these people. At the same time, we don't want to just let anyone who doesn't fancy paying their bill when you and I work really hard to pay ours to just get away with it. But there certainly needs to be checks and balances. We shouldn't be breaking into people's homes. I suspect that in future they'll just do it via smart meters wherever they can. You know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the issues, isn't it? That we're all being made to have these smart meters. Stephen, what do you think? As a former Labour MP, does your heart sink when you hear about these stories? I mean, there's one single mum with 4 children. I mean, it's all, the video is all there, the undercover footage, and the delight, actually.
Well, more than being a former MP, I was a former housing officer and dealing with people in crisis in temporary accommodation. And a lot of these people, their lives are in crisis. My wife's a magistrate, and she will have 100 of these applications come before her on the magistrate's bench, every one of which she wants to consider. But in about 1% of the cases, the people actually come along because their lives are so utterly chaotic. But I think there's 2 aspects. One is your position on this. With great power comes great responsibility. Journalism has changed the law because today they're going to actually change the system. So from your position, you and your colleagues in modern journalism can actually shine a light on something and change it for the better. With great power comes great responsibility.
But why don't these energy companies have more responsibility? It shouldn't have to take a journalist like Paul Morgan-Bentley to expose this.
I mean, I used to hate key meters.
They're unregulated.
Because the problem with key meters is that as you know, you pay more for your energy than you would if you actually pay with a bill. But there are some...
So let's just explain this, because some people may not understand. I didn't really understand this when we first covered this a couple of weeks ago. So this is people who have poor credit ratings are forced by the energy company to prepay for their energy.
Precisely so. And what you do is you'll go to the corner shop and you'll buy a little fob, and they will charge it up for you, but it will be more expensive than being directly billed. Now, look, there are some people, now, for example, Airbnb is an obvious example, where people are moving in and out, where you can't, every time somebody comes in for a weekend, set up an account for them. And there is actually a place for them. But what the energy companies have been doing, as far as I can see, is actually taking the easy option. They've not bothered to investigate. They're not bothered to use some of their vast... They're as rich as Croesus, for heaven's sake. And they could actually employ a few people to knock on the door and speak to the people. Now, I think Renee's point about can't pay, won't pay is very, very important. But in this particular case, it's not can't pay, won't pay. It's they just simply can't be bothered.
Is that right? Is it, is it... I mean, I'm with you as well, Renee. We have a lot of people, frankly, who are ligging off the system. Let's be honest. There are some people who are in a benefits culture. That is how they live. Not many. We mustn't tar everybody, especially at the moment. There are a lot of people working blimmin' hard and really, really struggling. But how do we differentiate between those who do need to be genuinely held to account for not paying their bills and those who we need to help? It's very difficult.
It is difficult, but it's obviously possible. Of course it's possible, because we means test lots of things in society. So we need some systems in place where these gas people can't just, on electric of course, can't just cut people off willy-nilly because they're not paying, that they have to go through a process where, people's lives are examined. We spend enough money, we waste enough money. Let's put some money behind this. Let's Shell, who've just earned £32 billion in profit, put some money behind this to actually really differentiate those who cannot pay. And there are lots of those people at the moment.
Absolutely.
From those who just don't want to pay because other things are more important and bills are high.
I feel like we have to also talk about how people, whether there should be more teaching about how to economise, how to manage our money better, how to manage finance. Because as you say, some of these people have incredibly chaotic lives and it just runs away with them, doesn't it? And then they put their head in the sand.
And the problem is,
next thing you've got
you ignore it. My dad used to say he never opened a bill unless it had a red ink on the outside, because they were the final demands. There are people who do that all the time. But I think one of the problems here is the collection agencies. I mean, the collection agencies, we used to call them bailiffs back in the day, do get a bad press, but sometimes I'm afraid there's some wrong uns in there. And it looks to me as though these people have been kicking the door in first and then thinking second.
Well, you do see that by the absolute joy that some of the people in this undercover story actually had when they went into the single dad who had 3 children, and there were toys all over the floor, and he made the comment when he left that when we came in the radiators were warm and now they're cold. I mean, that is barbaric.
It is.
That's a wrong one. That man should not be certainly going into people's homes.
Where is the training? Where is the duty of care? Where is the... Like you say, Stephen, it's about individual case analysis. Gosh, one size fits all, because that suits huge corporations often. Right, moving on. Rishi Sunak is... Sunak or Sunak?
Sunak.
Sunak. People keep telling me off for saying Sunak. And I say, I'm from Manchester, it's Sunak.
The mistake is Sadek Khan. People call him Sadiq Khan. He hates it. His name is Sadek Khan.
I see, right, OK.
Well, he's also known by a number of other things.
Yeah, well, true. Right, OK, so Rishi Sunak is ready to ban unions from leaving parents in limbo and force teachers to tell heads who is planning to join the walkouts. Because this is one of the things that I think was most shocking about the strikes yesterday. On Walkout Wednesday, we had 500,000 people on strike in the UK yesterday, was the fact that some of the teachers' unions allowed their teachers not to warn their heads if they weren't going to be in the classroom. It makes it impossible to plan. That just felt like twisting the knife, Stephen.
Well, the 1992 Trade Union and Labour Relations Act was very, very badly drawn. One of the things that they insisted on doing in that was actually in a school, the union had to tell the head teacher how many members were actually in the school, how many members they had, but they didn't have to say which ones were in the union. And the problem is there's no requirement then for the union to actually say to the head teacher, 74 people or 112 will be out.
Yeah.
And partly because they don't know themselves. But I think this is a blunt instrument. It's probably not going... Ultimately, Churchill said, Jaw is better than war. Some of these gestures, he's trying to throw some red meat to the Tory right. It's simply ill thought out. It's a bit like the Trade Union Labour Relations Act.
Yeah. What do you think, Renee?
Was
your little girl at school yesterday?
She was, because my little girl's at a private nursery. So, once again, it's the disadvantaged who are being more disadvantaged than those who are paying. And, I come at this from a slightly different angle. I think that just because there is no requirement for the NEU to let head teachers know, morally, to try and protect children as best as possible, should they not have been telling them? And that tells me everything I need to know about the NEU, that morally, they don't give a damn about children. We've seen their lives destroyed over the last 3 years, Bev. We've seen them put into masks because the NEU wanted to actually score a point. We've seen doors with the bottom sawn off in Scotland. They sit in freezing classrooms with no evidence at all. Their education destroyed. And now, once again, now that they're back trying to get into a rhythm and prepare for their GCSEs, the NEU decide that they're going to screw it up as much as they possibly can.
Yeah. Where are the children? Where are the needs of the children in this conversation? That's the bit I find utterly baffling. But with Rishi Sunak making these moves, Stephen, to compromise the rights of workers and the freedoms of workers to strike more and more and more, do you like that direction? Oh, I guess
no. No. I mean, don't pigeonhole me because I'm like most.
You're your own man, aren't you, Stephen Pound?
I was always considered to be on the moderate right of the party. No. I mean, trade union legislation is important, and minimal levels of service are important. What I don't like is inefficiency, incompetence, and not thinking things through. When the government actually says you're going to have a 10% level something on the tube, and then expect the union to nominate the 10% of the people who are going to keep running the tube, and then not even to take into account the fact they're going to ring up sick anyway. Or say, that the tubes are dangerous in service. There's many things. It's just not been thought out. The trouble is they're looking at the wrong end of the equation. It's one thing trying to penalise people, which is what they're trying to do, to force people, again, insist on you doing this. They shouldn't be at that situation in the first place.
Is it just that they're asking for too much money, all of these strikes? Don't we have to find a middle ground somewhere?
Well, I mean, collective bargaining, the clue's in the name. The second word is bargaining.
Yeah.
And I was a trade union negotiator in the NHS for years and years and years. We never, ever went in on anything less than 3 or 4 times what we wanted. And, 1979, we unfortunately went too far.
Yes. And actually, I actually think, Bev, on that note, that's exactly what they're doing. It's he who asks for the most outrageous thing at the start who ends up closest to where they want to be. But I think if they carry on and the government just stand firm as they are, we're going to get to a point where inflation's back down to 2% by the end of the year.
Well, no, the nurses will get the money. But the interesting thing is that inflation doesn't work in public service. I mean, you're not going to put the costs up if the nurses get a pay rise. It simply doesn't work out that way. And most of these people, you're not going to put the cost of education up if the teachers get a pay rise.
The thing just to say about this, of course, is that the NEU would say, and they aren't here to defend themselves, and we should point that out, also, is that the reason that legislation is there, that the workers do not have to tell their bosses if they are going to be in the office or not, is in order to stop any sort of bullying or discrimination in the workplace from the heads who might make their life difficult. That's the reasons for it. But anyway.
But the children should be at the top of this list.
Absolutely.
But the head teachers are going to know the next day anyway.
You mean for going forward for the future, which ones are off?
Of course they are. So,
Yeah.
you know, why tie yourself up in knots in this ridiculous way? Negotiate, talk, discuss, bargain, and actually do it like grown-ups.
I spoke to a teacher who was on strike yesterday, and she said she just caught up with some marking.
I actually think they'd actually get a lot more support if they went on strike in the holidays.
Oh, of course they would. Now, after the break, low traffic neighbourhoods are on the rise in London. The idea of them is to reduce through traffic in our neighbourhoods to tackle emissions. Is it all that's all it's about? That's all after your morning's news.
It's 10:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England's expected to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row later, this time from 3.5 to 4%. The announcement's expected at midday and is part of efforts to control inflation. Some experts predict we could see a final hike next month, with the rate peaking at 4.5%. Economics commentator Laurie Laird explains how the rise could affect us.
Anyone who has any debt, any credit card debt, a lot of us have credit card debt, and everything is keyed off what's called bank rate. It goes all the way through the system, and it tends to be, we do see consumer interest rates on mortgage rates, credit card debt. We tend to see that go up pretty quickly. We don't tend to see it come down. It's stickier on the way down.
Critics of the Prime Minister say his first 100 days in office have been marred by Tory sleaze scandals and a staggering economy. Rishi Sunak's under pressure to reveal what he knew about bullying allegations against Dominic Raab and the tax affairs of Nadhim Zahawi. His time as Prime Minister has also been blighted by continued industrial action and the cost of living crisis. Ofgem has launched an urgent investigation into British Gas. It's after claims debt collectors hired by the company broke into customers' homes to install prepayment meters. The decision by the energy regulator follows an investigation by the Times newspaper. An undercover journalist accompanied debt collectors who reportedly entered the homes of vulnerable people to force-fit prepayment meters. Business Secretary Grant Shapps says he's horrified by the report. And around 2.3 million households missed an essential payment last month, including mortgages, rent and credit cards, new data reveals. According to Which's Consumer Insight Tracker, 59% of people had to either cut back on essentials, sell property or dip into savings to cover spending. It's calling on essential businesses, including energy providers, to do more to help customers. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Bev will be back in just a moment.
Hello, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Most places dry today. Fairly cloudy out there. It is pretty mild, though. Temperatures in double figures for most. And there is some rain across northern Scotland from these weather fronts. High pressure is the dominant feature, but it is to the south, and we've got westerly winds, which are bringing some light rain and drizzle to parts of northwest England, the hills and mountains of West Wales as well. But the heaviest rain is certainly across northern Scotland. Quite gusty in places, but not as windy as yesterday for most, although the winds will pick up through this evening over northeast England and eastern Scotland. Most places pretty grey, but some breaks in the cloud, a hint of sunshine across parts of the east. And we will see those temperatures, as I said, double figures for most. We could get up to 13 Celsius in one or two spots. That rain will continue for a time this evening, but ease off across the Highlands and the Western Isles before midnight. That rain then pushes southwards as a kind of a weak band, just turning a bit damp for parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland through the early hours. Elsewhere, again, most places dry. It will turn a little colder across northern parts with some showers in Shetland and Orkney. Further south, a very mild start to Friday. And a similar day on Friday, actually. In the west, a lot of clouds and drizzle over the hills of Wales. A bit damp for northwest England to start with. We will see outbreaks of rain across western parts of Scotland. But brighter skies developing, perhaps across parts of East Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. Most places just dry and cloudy. And again, temperatures getting up into the teens in one or two locations and widely up to double figures. Won't be as windy on Friday either. As we go through the evening, we'll see that rain just heading its way across the Northern Isles. Still some drizzle over Western Hills, but most places looking dry, and many places will be dry into Saturday too. Certainly for England and Wales, we will see some rain for a time crossing Scotland and Northern Ireland. Most places turning brighter on Sunday with some sunny spells, but also a little colder.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Very good morning. It's 10:38 on Thursday. We've nearly made it to the end of the week. This is GB News. There have been a few stories at the moment about low traffic neighbourhoods in the headlines this week. These LTNs, they're causing a lot of controversy. Hackney in London is the latest area with proposals to ban motorised through traffic from 75% of the borough's roads. It follows a move by Islington Council to cut traffic on 70% of its roads. It's argued that these low traffic neighbourhoods create a greener and healthier environment. So a man who knows all about this and is following this story incredibly closely is co-founder of the Together Declaration and Together Association, Alan Miller. Good morning, Alan. Hello.
Morning,
good morning. Bev. Good to see you. I'm not sure we can hear you, but let me just tell you, Alan. Right. So this low traffic neighbourhood scheme, in principle, sounds very, very nice, clean air. What's the problem with it? Explain it.
Well, basically, firstly, it's undemocratic because every time there's been a so-called consultation with very loaded questions, they ignore the majority of the respondents. So, for instance, there are 17,000 people in Hackney that were presented as a petition to Mayor Philip Glanville, the Mayor of Hackney. He's flagrantly disregarded that. We've seen the same in Oxford, where 93% had comments saying they didn't want it when they put the consultation forward. And this is true of Haringey as well, with 65%. So the first point is democracy. The next point is that it actually simply moves traffic to other areas. It creates huge congestion. It stops everything from deliveries to people being able to do the school run properly, see elderly families. People with disabilities are really massively impacted. Now, in Bath, we've seen 15 LTNs go up. They say they want to have 48. And we have a public debate that we had organised in Bath. And you know what, Bev? Our venue was actually stopped. Somehow it got cancelled because they told us at the time they thought it was too political, but then they said it was about numbers. But we've got a new venue, Bev, in Bath that we're doing a big public debate tonight at. We've invited Bath and North East Somerset Council, the councillors, both Sarah Warren and Amanda Rigby. But the main thing is that this is about locals. You know, the Together Association, our declaration, we have hundreds of signatories and members in every area. They try and present this as outsiders coming in. They've done that in Hackney. I'm a resident in Hackney. People say, well, we don't want these outsiders. But actually, as our videos show at the Together Declaration on our socials, this is about residents, shopkeepers, people in hospitality, grandmothers. There's a grandmother in Oxford that's done a really compelling video saying these new bus gates and the 15-minute neighbourhood is going to really impact her. We've seen shops being closed down just recently in Haringey after Tara did a video about the impacts and 65% not wanting them. She's had to close her business down in Haringey and move. We've seen in Oxford a restaurateur after 15 years having to close it only last week because of low traffic neighbours. And of course, Clint Pugh, who spent 30 years regenerating the area, faces the closure of one of his businesses. So it's London, but it's also other areas. And we would really invite people in Bath to come along tonight, and also to have councillors come and have a public debate and stop trying to smear people. It seems that whenever people don't want to debate something or discuss it, and as you know, as we've just seen recently, there's been significant attempts to stop all sorts of debates recently, and with the online safety bill just going through the second hearing at the moment in the Lords, it's vital that we get to discuss this with local residents and businesses. Councillors should explain the merits of their views, why they're not listening to local residents and businesses. These are about damaging harms and impacts, and it's essential. And that's why we say it together. We've got to take back democracy and free our streets, because the public needs to have our voices heard.
Absolutely. I've been inviting onto this show several local councillors, local mayors, MPs from these areas to come on and explain the benefits of these significant changes to the road layouts in the areas. And none of them will accept the invitation, Alan Miller. That's what's so depressing. And I think, if I've understood this correctly, your argument at Together primarily is not necessarily about the planet. It isn't necessarily about pushing back and saying these eco measures aren't warranted. You want to see these decisions being put in the hands of a democratic process in those areas and how it's going to affect local people. Is that right?
Absolutely right. I mean, there's a big discussion to be had about the question of the climate, but we're told that we're at a permanent emergency. We saw it with the response to COVID. We're now seeing it in the discussion about the climate. It seems that at every measure, we've got to have permanent emergencies. And it should be known that these low traffic neighbourhoods, these LTNs, were brought in stealth. There were a few before, but during lockdown. And they've kind of now sprung up in many areas, and now many more are being proposed. And a lot of people don't even know about them. Yeah. The consultations didn't go to that many people. That's why we're saying take back democracy. We've got to have local residents, citizens in Britain being able to hold these questions in an open debate. Let councillors and the central government, Bev, because the central government is funding this as well. It's fines. You know, when did we agree as a nation or locally that you would have to negotiate your mobility? Right? We've never had that discussion. Yet all of a sudden, people don't like saying it's not new forms of lockdowns and restrictions. Oxford responded very starkly to that. But actually, if you look at the logic, what they're saying is we are going to fine, a bit like feudal times, we are going to fine you to move out of areas. We're going to impose taxes. It's a stick. It hasn't been agreed on, and we need to have a wide discussion. So that's why people in Bath should join us tonight. We hope that Bath and North East Somerset Council will attend. But what we really are going to do, like on our other campaigns, is we're going to be doing calls to action, asking councillors and MPs and Mark Harper in the Cabinet, the Transport Minister, why these things are happening. We need to really end them and have a proper democratic discussion about our urban planning plans.
Alan, is your mind put at rest at all by the statement from Bath on the LTNs? They say it is just a trial. No decisions will be made on whether to make this scheme permanent until the council has reviewed all of the comments, which people can still submit until May the 17th. So they're just trying it. May not work.
Well, you know, we're told that these are trials, and yet what we see is each one builds on the other. So there's a trial of 15, then there's 48. Like in Oxford, there's a trial of LTNs, and then it becomes a 15-minute neighbourhood. Now they've got another trial on top of those two trials to actually impact that will impact health workers and key workers in schools to impose more charges on top of these trials. So they call them trials, but yet they're very kind of zealous about the implementation of them. We should remember that there's a lot of money being made out of all these things. That's a huge incentive, both from central government and themselves. And we need to insist on proper services, how we can get housing and transport done properly. And that takes having the public at the heart of it. And that's what Together wants to make happen. And we've got local and regional groups doing this across the country. OK, well done. Alan Miller there from the Together Association. Seek out his work and make your feelings known to your local MP as well if you don't agree with these. Now, as the cost of living crisis continues to bite, tenants who are renting properties are being pushed to the limit, with landlords facing a unique struggle: raise the rent and pay their own bills, or keep it the same and risk going out of business. Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has been finding out exactly how landlords are being affected by the rising cost of living.
As the cost of living rises, so does the cost of where we live. According to real estate company Zoopla, the average rent in the UK in 2022 was 12.1% higher than the year before. But with the ripple effect of increased prices, many landlords are being left with no other choice.
A lot of our tenants are understandably asking if there's anything that we can do about their rent to bring it down. And unfortunately, in some cases, we've had to actually put the rent up because our bills have gone up and up and up. You know, we've got the utility expenses, which have risen dramatically. We've got interest rates and the costs of our mortgages going up substantially. We've got the cost of labour and materials for repair and maintenance all going up. And this is having a huge effect on our business. It's all hitting the bottom line.
Landlords are often perceived as the bad guys. Of course, there are some who take advantage of tenants and increase prices by inordinate amounts. But is it fair to villainise them all?
As landlords get put under further and further pressure, as they are called out in the public media, it does make it increasingly difficult to run businesses. It makes that conversation with tenants increasingly difficult because that relationship's really, really important. But I think to taint all of the landlords with that same brush is dangerous.
The cost of living is effectively forcing landlords into a proverbial corner. And yet, many people are still calling for the government to impose a cap on private rental increases. However, as more and more landlords are driven out of the sector, there are fears around how capping could impact the supply of available housing.
If you want to encourage people to bring their properties to the market, if you want to have a sensible supply of properties, then actually the last thing that you should think about doing is capping rents. From the outside looking in, I can see that that might be an attractive move in the context of cost of living, but it's a false economy. And I think, government will need to tread very carefully before it starts meddling in the private rented sector.
Ultimately, as prices rise for tenants, they also rise for landlords. The challenge now is finding a short-term solution in which both sides can survive. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Right, welcome back. We are still here. Renee Hoenderkamp, NHS doctor, is with me, as is Labour MP Stephen Pound. We were all nattering them, weren't we? We were talking, we got a bit distracted. I always get a bit distracted when we talk about this man. Ron DeSantis.
Contain yourself.
I will contain myself. So, obviously, he is the governor of Florida, Republican. He wishes to remove all taxes on gas stoves and also on baby products. This is what he said.
We just added, because I think it needs to be done, no tax permanently on gas stoves. They want your gas stove, and we're not going to let that happen. And we're not even a state. The way Florida was built, a lot of this wasn't even connected to gas lines. You got a lot of electric stuff. But it's just the principle of, this is ridiculous that they do want to go after it. They got blowback, so they kind of had to back off. They want to go after the gas stoves. And so we're saying, we want you to be able to buy those.
Still my beating heart, because I think he's amazing, and I love how strong he is, Renee. I love the fact that he is pushing back while standing as a Republican candidate. We don't know yet if he's not thrown his hat into the ring in terms of the next election in America. But there is so much about this man that I just adore.
Yes, and I adore him with you. We won't fight over him, you know.
We might.
We might. But I agree. You know what? Look,
he has the most incredible wife, 3 children. He's a very happy family man.
Thank you. But I was just going to say that's actually part of his appeal, that we have a young man who's got a family, a young family.
He's done his military service.
He's done his military service. He lives by principles in his life, and he's appealing to the average man because he feels like he's in touch with us.
Yeah.
And he's a good-looking man too.
Yeah. If he was to run as president next time, would he be a shoo-in, do you think, Stephen?
I don't think he'd be a shoo-in because there's people like Nikki Haley, there's plenty of other people around, and, you know, there's obviously Mike Pompeo, you know, Mike Pence, there's any number of people. But I think DeSantis is a very, very interesting person in many, many ways. I don't like the way he brings his children out onto the stage with him, I think. Yeah, but that's I just don't like that in the generality.
Obama did it.
But I have to say, if good looks were the only way you could get elected, how in God's name did I ever get elected? over and over. But look, Florida was a Democrat state, then a swing state, and now I think he got 58% of the vote in Florida last time. That says something about it. And it's a very interesting place because the whole, St. Petersburg, the whole bit in North Florida is full of sort of Jewish care homes and a very, very strong Jewish community there. And what they call snowbirds, people who come down from New York. It's not natural Republican territory. No. And he's also won over the Cuban diaspora, particularly down in the southern end of the state. He's done very well indeed. But is that transferable to Pennsylvania? I don't think that's going to play well in California. I don't know. But at the moment, a ticket of him and Nikki Haley looks quite impressive. And I would be a Democrat if I was in America.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons, well, the main reason, Renee, is that he stormed to such prominence globally and was so popular with his electorate was how he handled the pandemic. And
yes.
He was absolutely counter-narrative.
He really was, and he had people around him, the Surgeon General, who actually agreed with him and used data. And I think again they were actually tucking in to what people really felt underneath. Clearly, we didn't know what this was, but there were a lot of people who were not allowed to speak, and I think that was the telling thing. You weren't allowed to speak if you wanted to question the COVID narrative. And DeSantis said, "No, speak, because this is what I think."
Yeah. And actually, in terms of the damage and the fatalities from COVID, Florida is very much an outlier alongside Sweden, that they took very little measures, if any, and they had no demonstrable increase in fatalities.
It was very much geographical. I mean, there were parts of Florida which did have a high level, but in the generality of the whole state, you're absolutely right. But this is about gas. And what's fascinating about that is America is now self-sufficient in gas because they've had the good sense to go for hydraulic fracturing. And they are now exporting gas to us in this country because we're too damn NIMBY-ish to actually allow us to take the very gas, the very fuel that God's given us, and we could be extracting it and using it. Now, I don't know entirely why banning gas hobs is all about. I mean, my son, who's an electrician, he's delighted. He spends all his time telling people not to have gas.
Yeah.
But it is an essential component of many homes. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Joe Biden is very astute and on the ball about this, but I don't.
Do you? Really? I'm not astute and on the ball about anything.
Well, I'm sorry, I'd forgotten that. No, but I just don't know why they're actually fighting Hobgate and why this is suddenly a big issue.
Well, I have to tell you, in my house, it's absolutely freezing. I quite often use my 6 hob rings to heat up my kitchen because it's so cold. And no one is taking it.
My mother used to open the oven and have the oven door open. And we'd sit round in the kitchen and then, until the day my father put his feet in there to warm them up. We shall say no more.
Well, I think, Look, the gas thing is part of it. And it's also because of what that represents, isn't it? It represents him pushing back against a lot of the eco-zealotry. And as you say, they have plenty of gas that they are extracting, and that just doesn't make any sense.
What are they going to do with it?
Well, sell it to us.
Gas hubs. Sell it to us.
And it's not our carbon footprint, of course, so then it's fine.
Yeah.
No, it's not, Doctor.
Doctor, let me ask you this. Folic acid should be pumped into rice as well as bread, and doses should be quadrupled to prevent 600 extra cases of life-threatening birth defects every year, according to experts. Now, the government has unveiled plans to add folic acid to flour. I don't like the government meddling with stuff in my food that I haven't asked them to put there.
Yeah, so I've actually kind of done a 180 on this, I really have. So, a couple of years ago I thought it was a good idea to put fluoride in water because we have more children having general anaesthetics than for anything else because of their teeth. But Actually, having had a look and listened to people, I've kind of turned myself around on that, and I have on this too. Folic acid is really important because it really does stop spina bifida, which is a terrible disease. My best friend at school had it, and I watched her go through physio every day. It's horrible and awful, and we abort most pregnancies where we find spina bifida. That's the next thing. But at the same time, I think I too now have decided that the government should not be telling us what to eat, when to eat it, and giving us no choice. Not that I think many people use flour, but giving us no choice over that. So I think where this money should be spent is actually convincing people how important it is when they're thinking about pregnancy to go out, get themselves some folic acid and take responsibility for their own pregnancy.
Are there any, do you think, side effects from having too much folic acid?
I think there probably are, but I think at the levels that this will be, no. And folic acid is quite difficult to get from food unless you eat good food all of the time. But at the same time, I think, we do have to start. I think we need to rewind on everything now and go for personal responsibility because we've lost it.
It's interesting that there'd be huge debates in the House about fluoride, ignoring the fact that for 200 miles of the eastern coastline, fluoride occurs naturally in water. But I think it's quite interesting. The first ever adulterated food legislation in this country came about in the late 18th century because of adulterated flour. It used to get cut with chalk, and it had loads of it. So I think at the moment, I bet you Monsanto at the moment are actually putting a folic acid component within one of their grains. And I have to say, I'm not a doctor, not remotely, and I very seldom get pregnant. But I have to say, the folic acid is a good thing, but maybe I would be slightly go on the libertarian line here. If you want to take folic acid, take it in a capsule, like I take vitamins in the morning. But the idea that you've got a loaf of bread and you have no say in it,
exactly,
different matter.
Very different.
And the evidence is actually...
I don't want to agree too much, by the way.
The evidence is really clear. If you take a 400, microgram tablet of folic acid in the first 2 months of your pregnancy, it dramatically reduces your chances of having a defect.
That's right. So spend this money on giving folic acid tablets free to women who present with the GP when they're pregnant. It's not complicated. Choice. Give us choice. Individual choice. Right, that's the end of the first hour. Our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been in power for 100 days. I'm going to reflect upon how his premiership has gone so far. See you in a few minutes.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Welcome back to Bev Turner today on GB News. Before midday, we are reflecting on Rishi Sunak's 100 days in office. Is it cause for celebration or despair, and what we should expect? What should we expect from his next 100 days? I want to know what you think. And we're covering the awful story on energy as British Gas were found breaking into the homes of the vulnerable and forcefully installing prepayment meters. How do we hold them accountable for that? That's all coming up after a look at your latest news.
Good morning. It's exactly 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England's expected to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row later, this time from 3.5 to 4%. The announcement's expected at midday and as part of efforts to control inflation. Some experts predict we could see a final hike next month, with the rate peaking at 4.5%. Economics commentator Laurie Laird explains how the rise could affect us.
Affects anyone who has any debt.
Credit
credit card debt. A lot of us have credit card debt. And everything is keyed off what's called bank rate. It goes all the way through the system. And it tends to be, we do see consumer interest rates on mortgage rates, credit card debt. We tend to see that go up pretty quickly. We don't tend to see it come down. It's stickier on the way down.
The Prime Minister's critics say his first 100 days in office have been marred by Tory sleaze scandals and a staggering economy. Rishi Sunak's under pressure to reveal what he knew about bullying allegations against Dominic Raab and Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs. His time as Prime Minister has also been blighted by continued industrial action and the cost of living crisis. Leon Emirali, former aide to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, told us Mr Sunak's performance to date has been average.
I think he's got a solid C. I don't think he's done anything particularly remarkable. I don't think he's had a catastrophe. He has steadied the ship from that short-term economic shock after Liz Truss's mini-budget. I don't think he's necessarily weak, but that's the perception that's out there, and that's what Labour are running with. And in politics, once an idea is being seeded, it's very hard to shake that.
The boss of Centrica, the owner of British Gas, says he's horrified that contractors for the company had broken into struggling customers' homes, saying there's no excuse. His comments come shortly after Ofgem, the energy regulator, announced it was launching an urgent investigation into British Gas. Its decision follows a sting by the Times newspaper. An undercover journalist accompanied debt collectors who reportedly entered the homes of vulnerable people to force-fit prepayment meters. Shell says its profits have increased by more than 53%, with earnings of more than £68 billion last year. It's the company's highest profit in its 115-year history. The energy giants benefited from soaring oil prices due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It comes as consumers continue to grapple with soaring energy costs. Well, that is around 2.3 million households missed an essential payment last month, including mortgages, rent and credit cards, new data's revealed. According to the consumer organisation Which, 59% of people had to either cut back on essentials, sell property or dip into savings to cover spending. It's calling on essential businesses, including energy providers, to do more to help customers. Meanwhile, households in England and Wales will see their water bills rise by 7.5% from April. Industry body Water UK says customers will pay an average of £31 more compared with last year. The annual bill for an average household will hit £448. That's the biggest increase in almost 20 years. The Royal College of Nursing says A&E waiting times have risen dramatically since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. It claims over 10,000 additional patients regularly wait over 12 hours for treatment each month. Today, the RCN will deliver a petition to Downing Street calling for fair pay for nursing staff. It's received more than 110,000 signatures so far. The Health Secretary says England is set to be one of the first countries in the world to wipe out hepatitis B. It comes as the World Health Organization said transmissions of hepatitis B from mothers to their babies has effectively been eliminated in England. The latest data shows infections now stand at just 0.1%. Since the invasion by Russia, more than £400 million has been donated to UK charities to help people in Ukraine. According to the United Nations, the Disasters Emergency Committee is the biggest charity donor to the response inside Ukraine. The UK government match-funded £25 million of public donations to the DEC's Ukraine humanitarian appeal. And King Charles won't feature on Australia's new $5 banknote. The current image is a portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, but the new design will pay tribute instead to the culture and history of Indigenous Australians. The country's central bank says it'll take a number of years to design and print the new notes. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to you, Bev.
Thank you, Rihanna. Now, welcome back. Bev Turner today on GB News, TV and DAB Radio. Here's what's coming up this hour. Rishi Sunak marks 100 days in office as Prime Minister today, with his premiership plagued by scandals and strikes. Data from YouGov suggests that 56% of people think Rishi Sunak is doing a poor job as Prime Minister, as he trails 21 points behind Labour leader Keir Starmer. And as more people struggle with the cost of living crisis, Shell has announced a record annual profit, would you believe? That's more than double the figure reported in 2021. So why isn't the government demanding a proper windfall tax on energy giants? I'm going to be joined back here in the studio by Dr. Renee Hoendekamp and former Labour MP Stephen Pound to discuss the big topics of the day, including the devout Christian mother taking her child's primary school to court over gay pride. And of course, this show is much improved with your views. Do not forget to vote in my Twitter poll this morning. I'm asking you, with Rishi Sunak being our Prime Minister for 100 days today, does he deserve another 100 days in power? Only 28% of you are backing him so far. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me to have your say. So, some of your views on Rishi Sunak being Prime Minister for 100 days. Jen has said, I think Sunak is the worst Prime Minister since Blair. I voted Tory last time. Next election, I will vote Reform. The Tories are useless. And Phil says, we need the urgency of Liz Truss to get things done. Sunak and Hunt are behaving like we are still in the EU with the shackles on. Our business model is different now, and there is no reason not to accelerate our way to growth. A lot of you actually getting in touch saying that you've been lifelong Conservative members, but you just can't vote for him. So let's talk to an expert on this. So far, his premiership of Rishi Sunak has been defined by ministerial scandals and strike action. Data from YouGov suggests 56% of you think that he's doing a poor job. Now, joining me is assistant editor at Conservative Home, William Atkinson. Good morning, William. So, how would you vote? How would you vote in my Twitter poll, first of all? Does he deserve another 100 days in office? How's he done?
I think he does deserve another 100 days in office. But then, of course, the Mandy Rice-Davies defence does apply, I think, in that respect. No, I think Rishi Sunak, I voted for him to be Prime Minister in the leadership election during last summer, for example. So I've always been sympathetic to Rishi. I think his diagnosis of the economic situation was much better than Liz Truss's. And I think, actually, at the moment, he's probably the best person the Conservative Party has to first stabilise the situation, as he's been aiming to do in his first 100 days, and then try and push on to win that next election victory. But I think when voters, and especially long-standing Conservative Party voters, complain about the inability of the government to get anything done, I am sympathetic to say that they haven't done more in the last 13 years. I think the problem is that there are so many headwinds against the government, whether that's global economic conditions, whether that's the migration crisis, or whether it's even the stubborn nature of some of their own backbenchers. That it's no surprise, really, that Rishi Sunak finds himself with his hands so badly tied. He's trying to hold together a very fractious party that, frankly, after 13 years in power, is trying to sort of work out what it actually wants to do with it and whether it deserves to remain in power any longer.
When he was talking to a group of NHS clinicians earlier this week, he said the things that happened before I was Prime Minister, I can't do anything about. What I think you can hold me to account for is how I deal with things that arise on my watch. But he was Chancellor of the Exchequer when a lot of these decisions were being made. And I think that's what doesn't ring true for people, William. This idea, well, I'm new to this job. He's been a very integral part of Cabinet for quite a while.
Well, I think he became Chancellor in 2020. He actually joined the Cabinet in 2019. So you could say, yes, he was at the top of government for the entirety of Boris Johnson's time as Prime Minister. But remember, first of all, he had to spend most of that dealing with the impact of first the COVID pandemic and then the lockdowns in response to it. And secondly, he also has to clear up the economic mess that he inherited from his short-lived predecessor. And also, perhaps more importantly, he has to deal with the widespread loss of trust in the Conservative Party, Freudian slip man, based on the chaos of the two leadership elections last year, but also going further back, the sort of various scandals to do with Number 10 and Partygate and all the rest, which I think have actually damaged the Conservative Party's prospects much more with a lot of people who voted for it in 2019 than the defenestration of Boris Johnson or any subsequent crises have actually done. So I think he inherited the most sticky of sticky wickets. And I think it's just to try and stabilise the rapid fall in the Conservative Party's opinion poll ratings that he inherited was in itself something of a small achievement. And now he's got 2 years to try and turn around the situation to at least sort of prevent a wipeout of the next election or even try to win it. It's a very difficult task. But yeah, I think he is right to say that he didn't inherit the most sort of optimal sort of circumstances in which to try and do that.
I think also the frustration, even by people who want to vote Conservative, is that he didn't get there. He wasn't voted in by the Conservative Party membership. That's left a very poor taste in people's mouths. He hasn't been voted in by the electorate. And without this mandate, it's very hard for him, other than just styling it out, to convince people that he should be there making decisions. And in the meantime, you've always got Boris Johnson waiting in the wings, meddling around in Ukraine, apparently undermining some of the decisions which Sunak is making there about whether we should or should not send in jets. What does this look like, William? How does that relationship play out in the next 2 years, do you think?
Well, I think Boris Johnson is so far proving a very large headache for Rishi Sunak's administration. He's only likely to become a larger one when the Privileges Committee investigation really gets into full swing in the next few months. And then we might see what happens if, for example, the committee finds him guilty of sort of misspeaking to Parliament, and then he faces a by-election in Uxbridge and South Ruislip potentially. We'll see whether he moves to another seat. But I think also the relationship between Rishi Sunak and party members is obviously a difficult one, since they voted against him in a leadership election and then found him to be Prime Minister 7 weeks later. But from the polling that we've done for Conservative Home, they both supported Liz Truss resigning and then Rishi Sunak taking over, because it's clear that Liz Truss's premiership wasn't working. I think there's certainly parts of the party, both the parliamentary party and the membership, who will never forgive Sunak for the role that they see him as playing in Boris Johnson's defenestration. But the problem was Boris Johnson's government simply wasn't working. As much as Boris may have unique abilities as a communicator, he was unable to grip the Number 10 machine. He was unable to deliver on any of the pledges, aside from getting Brexit done, on which he was elected, and the government was descending into chaos. Rishi Sunak's great virtue, and the reason why I think he is the right person right now to be Prime Minister, is that he has stopped that rot. And he has actually managed to stabilise the Conservative Party, both in its poll ratings, but also in the basic day-to-day functioning of government. And if that doesn't mean that if that doesn't make him a decent enough Prime Minister, then I don't know what does. And he certainly would have my vote at the next election.
OK. All right. Thank you, William. William Laxton there from Conservative Home. Well, another headache that is facing Rishi Sunak is that his Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, there are all these calls still for him to resign over mounting bullying allegation. Sunak has already had to face one high-profile sacking following former Conservative Party chair Nadhim Zahawi's public exit on Sunday, of course. So let's get more analysis of this from GBNews political editor Darren McCaffrey. Hello, Darren. Hello, there you are outside Number 10 Downing Street. Now, is this another witch hunt to make the Conservative Party look bad, or is there more to this story?
Well, let's be honest and frank about this. These allegations of bullying around Dominic Raab have been around for a long time, years and years and years. In fact, actually, he took a libel case. I was just reading this morning. Now, in the end, the Mail lost this libel case, but more than a decade ago, there were allegations around bullying around Dominic Raab when he was an MP. Now, he's always denied this, as I say. Obviously, the government are looking into evidence. There is an independent inquiry taking place into it, and it's difficult to work this out. You listen to some people who've worked with the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister in his various guises in government. This is someone who's, of course, been Brexit Secretary in the past. He's also been the Foreign Secretary. And they say that, yes, it was very difficult, that they did see bullying activity, that he was someone who was not very pleasant to work with. You talk to others who say, yes, he may well have been forceful at times, but certainly none of his behaviour they viewed would verge on bullying. And you get these conflicting accounts. And clearly, obviously, how people deal with different individuals can often be conflicting. As I say, though, he's denied any allegations of bullying. These are being investigated, but yes, there are calls for him to step aside while this investigation takes place. Now, we're not expecting it to conclude for at least the next week or two, and there is enormous amounts of political pressure. Dominic Raab was in meeting Rishi Sunak yesterday, and I think the reason that this is more pertinent and more difficult and more tricky for the Prime Minister, if you like, than Nadeem Zahawi and those tax affair scandal over the last couple of weeks is simply for two reasons. First of all, there are questions about what the Prime Minister knew when he appointed Dominic Raab as Deputy Prime Minister. Downing Street insists he didn't know of any formal complaints, but did he know about other allegations swirling around? We haven't really got to the bottom of that. And second of all, Dominic Raab is incredibly close to Rishi Sunak. He was one of the people who headed up his leadership campaign during the summer. He clearly is Deputy Prime Minister. He's someone who deputises for Rishi Sunak when he is away. And that is why I think this in some ways is more awkward for the Prime Minister. But it builds into this narrative that Labour and others have been trying to portray, that this is a government that frankly cannot get away from one scandal to another. And that is a distraction. It weighs down on Rishi Sunak's government.
Let me ask you, Darren, as GBNews' political editor, how do you think Rishi Sunak's first 100 days would be characterised? Give me your professional opinion on whether he's done a good job or not.
Well, you know, frankly, it's not made to me whether he's done a good job or not. It's up to all of us, isn't it? In the end, there are, 68 million people in this country. It's going to be the majority of them who decide whether they think he's done a good job or not, and they'll get that chance at the next general election. They'll get that chance, frankly, at the local elections for many people in May. Has he fulfilled some of his pledges? I think he has. He's brought a form of stability. We have to remember, Britain was in a pretty tricky situation in the autumn when it came to the plunging pound, concerns of the financial markets, pensions on the precipice of falling over. He has definitely brought some economic and, to a degree, political stability over the last 100 days, 3 months or so. However, there have been lots of tricky moments too. He's had a U-turn on a number of policy issues. He's clearly had 2 cabinet ministers go to date, potentially a third to go. And also, you look at the opinion polls. They're not great. Yeah. In fact, they're far from great. They're going in some ways in the wrong directions, both for him and the Conservative Party. And as I say, this is all ahead of a spring budget, again, with a Conservative Party that want to see, or some within the Conservative Party, want to see tax cuts, rather than the path the current government is forming. And you've got those former prime ministers, and you've got those local May elections. So, Bev, in the end, I think in some ways the last 100 days are not going to matter nearly as much as the next 100 days.
Brilliant summing up there, Darren McCaffrey at Downing Street. Thank you. And as Darren says, what really matters is what you think at home. I've got a Twitter poll asking you, do you think that Rishi Sunak should be Prime Minister for 100 more days after he celebrates his 100th day in power today? Let me know what you think. At the moment, the vast majority of you do not want him to be there. And a lot of you will be Conservative voters, which is incredibly worrying. Now, as always, you can send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at GBNews. But coming up in just a moment, a Christian mother has sued a school for making her son take part in an LGBT pride parade, saying that she wanted her child to receive an education rather than an indoctrination. We're going to be discussing that in just a moment after this short break. See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Bev Turner Today on GB News. My guests are still here with me. Dr Renee Hoendekamp is here and former Labour MP Stephen Pound. You've also been getting in touch as well. We were talking about these low-traffic neighbourhoods earlier. Jenny said if councils refuse to acknowledge local democracy, then they'll certainly acknowledge people start withholding paying their rates, which means their council tax. And Jade says there's been more traffic around central London since these road closures. I couldn't agree more, Jade. It doesn't take rocket science to work out that sitting in traffic and having to take longer routes around causes more pollution. Thank you for all your messages. Right, 100 days of Rishi Sunak. Renee, what's your assessment?
Who noticed?
I noticed every day I keep talking about things that have gone wrong on the show.
Well, yes, of course, things that have gone wrong, but he's so dull and he hasn't actually grasped anything that people actually really care about, I think. And that's what worries me. I think he's going along with the clickbait, the headlines, you know, without actually getting down to the nitty-gritty. And I think we saw that yesterday in Prime Minister's Question Time, where Keir just went on the attack about his members of his team who have been up to no good. They should have been gone instantly so they weren't a distraction, and he should actually grow a pair and start being a bit bold.
He's quite good at PMQs, though.
He is quite good at PMQs, yeah.
He is good at that.
I did think yesterday of Keir, actually, why are you not tackling the things that are important to people? Why are you just going on the bullying and the Sahawi? let it go. Let's actually show people that you care about their lives and the cost of living crisis, and tell us what you're going to do about it.
The trouble with Rishi Sunak is he seems so robotic so much of the time, but he clearly, when he does PMQs, there is a fire in his belly that comes out. I'm just not sure that fire is to protect the interests of the vast majority of the people in this country, as opposed to his globalist pals.
He hasn't remotely sealed the deal yet. At the moment, his USP is, I'm not Boris Johnson, I'm not Liz Truss. Now, that's a fairly good place to be, and it's not a bad place to start. But just steadying the ship isn't good enough. The ship's got to be sailing in a particular direction, steady or not. And so I think that's the problem. But I have to say, if I was Rishi Sunak and I saw that thing in the paper today from Liz Truss saying, I've taken a breather, I'll be back, I would think, what? When troubles come, they come not as spies, but in battalions.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that would say Liz Truss's economic plan had all the right markings of growing the economy.
In the medium to long term, but you can't. It's creative destruction. The idea, if you're going to actually cut taxes to that degree, you're going to actually affect international credibility and basically the importance of the economy. If you do it that much, that quickly, that hard, chaos ensues. It should have been done as an aspiration over the medium to long term.
I disagree.
You cannot have year zero in fiscal policy.
I think she did it really well. She bucked the trend of the world. She sold it appallingly. Yeah. She should have been out there on a lectern, like Boris was with COVID, every single day, telling people why what. And the markets and the IMF punished her for being naughty and going off script. I really do, because what did for her were the markets.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't really understand enough about economics to understand why the market reacted so badly to her growth plan, because to everybody watching going, yes, we'd like to pay less tax, yes, we want more money in our pockets at the moment to pay our ridiculous bills.
Well, it's perfectly simple. What happened was, for her to actually have funded that, she'd have had to borrow. She'd have had to borrow to such a staggering degree, greater than anything we borrowed in the Second World War, that Standard & Poor and, all the international credit agencies would have downgraded us. The minute we downgrade, the amount of borrowing we already have becomes much, much more expensive. If you owed the bank £100 and they quadruple the interest, it's fairly simple. And so that was the problem. It was too much on a year zero. But the thing is, we actually depend on credibility and in the world zone, and we didn't have it when she hit it so hard. Not because of the principle, but simply because of the cost of borrowing.
But let us not forget that in the last banking crisis that we had, Standard & Poor and Moody's, who you're quoting, were actually responsible for that, because they turned a blind eye to the dodgy deals that were going on.
Subprime mortgages, yeah.
And they gave subprime mortgages a good rating when everybody knew they were absolutely toxic.
Well, S&P never, ever rated subprime mortgages.
Moody's.
Yeah.
Moody's did. So, I've read a lot about that banking crisis. So, these people that are ruining the world by their ratings do it in the way that they want the world to go.
Am I also right in thinking that Rishi Sunak was part of one of the quite small banks that sort of was part of that banking crisis?
I'm not sure. He was a hedge fund. He set up a hedge fund, didn't he? Yeah. Was it Citibank?
But to be honest, everybody was dragged in on it.
Yeah.
And it also became an accelerating process. But it was it was a castle built on sand.
Yes.
The idea that people are actually getting mortgages on trailer parks, in Tennessee.
Yeah.
It was a ludicrous situation. But thank heavens we had Gordon Brown, a steady hand on the tiller, the man who saved the world's economy.
And sold all the gold. Right.
Oh, he did that years ago.
Now, devout born-again Christian mother sues her 4-year-old son's school for making him take part in the UK. This is the first case of its kind in the UK, for making him take part in an LGBT parade. It was only a matter of time before one of these cases was going to end up in court. It is still in court at the moment. The hearing is continuing. Renee, just explain the background for us of this story and what happened.
So, firstly, I want to say that I hate the fact that this has gone as a born-again Christian headline. Why is it not just mother sues because she doesn't want? And it's the way that it's actually been positioned to us. So firstly, mother sues. And it's basically because she asked for her son to be excused from a parade celebrating Pride Month. She didn't want him to be part of it. And you know what? I actually think mothers and fathers should have that right. I think sexual education should go on at home, and I think it's fine that it goes on at school, but if you feel very strongly about the way it's been delivered, what's being delivered, you should have the right to know what it is and to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't want my child to take part in that. But that right has been removed, and that's what's underpinning this case.
Yeah. Well, the child was 4 years old. This is the mother, is Izzy Montague, at 38. And she was told by the head teacher of Heavers Farm Primary School in South Norwood, this is in South East London, that her son would not be allowed to opt out of the event in June 2018 because the mother had actually gone about this the right way. She'd actually said to the school, I don't want him to be part of this, actually. It sounds like she went about it in a professional manner that you should have interacting with your schools. And the school said, no, we will not give him the day off. So it's this 8-day case going on at the moment, and the judge has said that as a devout, born-again Christian, they bear a belief that sexual relations should be abstained from or take place within a lifelong marriage between a man and woman. Any activity outside those confines is sinful.
I have to say, I agree with the good doctor. I hate the way that mothers are simply described as born again. It's like, you know, we've got devout Catholics, or, you know, I mean, it's very,
it's
very...
It's a judgment, isn't it? It's allowing us to jump to a conclusion.
Precisely. Well, it's actually, you know, sort of marking the pitch before the match has started, I think. But look, this has been handled badly. The head teacher, Mrs. Papas, I think, you know, she hasn't done a very, very good job here. This could have been sorted out. However, you've got to ask yourself the one question. I mean, when I was at school, I was at a school where most of the people were a different religion to me. So we didn't sit in the assembly.
Right.
But we actually sat outside on that, which was, you know, charming. But so what would happen to this kid? If he has a day off school for that day, and all his friends would be saying, what's going on here? Would he have to sit in a separate classroom? I don't know. But I think it could have been handled subtly and sensitively. And the idea of actually embracing inclusion is one thing, but to have this particular specific agenda for a 4-year-old?
You know, I think it's deeper.
Not right.
I think it's deeper than that. So as a GP, I regularly get parents come to me to say, can I have a letter, please, to say that little Johnny can wear goggles in swimming because they won't let him unless you say so? Can I have a letter, please, because Johnny had the day off yesterday because he had diarrhea? I don't write the letters, and I always say to parents, you're the parent, you tell the school. But they're not allowed anymore. We, again, have taken away parental control, given it to the school, and the parents are not allowed to actually have any say. This is wrong. Again, it's another part of life where we do need to take back control.
Yeah, and parents have been so disempowered. I personally have a problem with the idea of teaching, of celebrating Gay Pride Week in a primary school. Because do you know what the word...
Well, it's reception, it's infant, isn't it?
Well, we tell children, I'm proud of you, right? It's a very powerful word for children, is the idea of pride. And they want to make mummy happy. They want to make daddy happy. They want us to be proud of them. And what message... We're not thinking this through, what it means to a child if you say, we'll be proud of you to be gay. Because I don't say to him, I'm proud of you to be straight. You're just straight. You know what I mean? So we're placing too much emphasis on this over-sexualisation of children. Right, we've got to move on. Right, coming up in just a moment, thank you both. British gas owner Centrica say that they are horrified that agents broke into vulnerable customers' homes to fit prepayment meters, but were they right to be there to begin with, excuse me. That's all after your morning's news.
It's 11:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Bank of England is expected to raise interest rates for the 10th time in a row later, this time from 3.5 to 4%. The announcement's expected in the next half hour and as part of efforts to control inflation. Some experts predict we could see a final hike next month, with the rate peaking at 4.5%. Economics commentator Laurie Laird explains how the rise could affect us.
Affects anyone who has any debt. If you have any credit card debt, a lot of us have credit card debt, and everything is keyed off what's called bank rate. It goes all the way through the system, and it tends to be, we do see consumer interest rates on mortgage rates, credit card debt. We tend to see that go up pretty quickly. We don't tend to see it come down. It's stickier on the way down.
The SNP says Rishi Sunak's first 100 days in office have been dogged by a festering swamp of Tory sleaze scandals. The Prime Minister's under increasing pressure to reveal what he knew about bullying allegations against Dominic Raab and the tax affairs of Nadeem Zahawi. He's also being criticised as families continue to struggle with the cost of living crisis, while energy companies announce huge profits. The boss of British gas owner Centrica says he's horrified contractors for the company broke into struggling customers' homes to fit energy meters. His comments come shortly after energy regulator Ofgem announced it was launching an urgent investigation. It follows a Times sting in which an undercover journalist accompanied debt collectors who reportedly entered the homes of vulnerable people to force fit prepayment meters. And around 2.3 million households missed an essential payment last month, including mortgages, rent and credit cards, new data reveals. According to Which's Consumer Insight Tracker, 59% of people had to either cut back on essentials, sell property or dip into savings to cover spending. It's calling on essential businesses, including energy providers, to do more to help customers. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Bev will be back with you in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
You even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back. It's 11:37. This is Bev Turner Today on GB News. Now, British gas owner Centrica say that they're horrified that debt collectors broke into vulnerable customers' homes to fit energy meters. The firm says that they've stopped applying for court warrants to face forced prepayment meter installations on people who've not paid their bills. The decision comes after a Times newspaper sting operation found that debt agents working for British Gas entering the homes of vulnerable people. Joining me for more on this is the former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Hello, Angela. Lovely to see you. You are always so informative on these topics. It's kind of shocking, this expose today, isn't it, by this journalist who's been undercover. Are you surprised to see these families having their properties invaded to have these meters forced into their homes?
Well, I do think it's a shocking story, and I think it's a wake-up call, not just to Centrica, but to all the energy companies. I mean, firstly, there are people who say, I'm not going to pay, they can afford to pay, but they won't pay. And so there is some as you do have to be able to deal with people in those circumstances, and that's what this process is supposed to be for, the process being that the energy company applies to the court for a court order in order to put in a prepaid meter. So the individuals who say they won't pay, but as I say, they can afford to, they then are given a prepaid meter so they're not cut off, and we, that is everybody else who does pay their bill, aren't picking up the tabs for them. But then, as you rightly point out, you've got a lot of people who fit into that vulnerable category. And that's things like the elderly, it's people who are disabled, it's those with very young children. And if they have hit a difficulty with being able to pay for their energy, and a lot of people are finding it difficult at the moment, then a prepaid meter is not the answer. They need to have an arrangement with their energy company, and importantly, the energy company has a responsibility, the energy supplier has a responsibility to find out first if somebody who isn't paying falls into one of those special categories, vulnerable categories, and if they do, then they shouldn't be applying to the court. What they should be doing is making another arrangement. Now, what British Gas, what Centrica has said is they've stopped all of their applications for court right now, and good on them. Clearly, they're going to have to sort out the vulnerable from the not vulnerable, but they've got a few months to do it, and then they can refresh how they approach this problem. And I think that what this sting has done, and what Centrica's announcement means, that all other energy companies pay exactly the same amount of attention first before applying for that court order.
The numbers are shocking, Angela, though, in terms of the number of court orders that were applied for. It's nearly 300,000 families. I mean,
I know.
Centrica and British Gas were determined to get these prepayment meters in these people's houses.
What it looks to me like is something, a process that was put in place for all, the sensible reasons that I've explained, because there are people who refuse to pay, and we shouldn't be picking up for them. It looks like a process that was put in place, that piece which says you do the due diligence to find out, the circumstances of the individual or the family or whatever it is first. It looks to me like that has not been done properly. And what's more, the courts have just granted the application rather than asking that question as well. So you're absolutely right to flag something has gone wrong. Yeah.
One of our viewers has been in touch, Pauline. She's messaged to ask this question, which you may be able to answer. She says, when people are already in debt and on such low wages, they need pay-as-you-go meters. So I cannot understand why the energy companies then charge them more for their gas than people being levied with bills. Why does that happen?
Yeah. It's been, that's a long time argument and long time point that many people are upset about. And the simple answer is because from the supplier's perspective, that process of having a prepaid meter costs the supplier more than it does if you've got an ordinary meter and you're on a direct debit. But if one stands back from it, again, I think that is a question where all the suppliers need to have a serious think about it. I should add that, don't forget, it's not the suppliers who are making much money. If you look to see their accounts, you find they're not very good at the moment, to say the least. The big money is being made by those who are drilling the stuff, bring the oil and gas out of the ground. So I'm not blaming suppliers, except in this instance, suppliers have really got to do much better work before they put in a prepaid meter. But as we consider the whole of our energy policy, our energy security, our energy arrangements, how we charge for it, and so on, including social tariffs, which are all things, that need to be done as a result of the real problems of this last year, 18 months, then this question about should you de facto be paying more if you have a prepaid meter, well, that's got to come and be considered as well. Because if there's what I would like to see, we have a social tariff for the poorer ends of society, then that would remove the cost, or that would remove a prepaid meter being more expensive.
Yeah. Angela, what do you make of this news today of record profits for Shell and record share prices for Centrica, who own British Gas, when people are struggling to pay their bills? It leaves a very, very bad taste in people's mouths.
Yes. Well, the answer is I'm not surprised. And the reason I say that is because when you see what has been happening on the wholesale market for oil and gas prices right around the world, then what that means is any global player, and of course Shell is a global player, they will have been selling that oil and gas at that price, and therefore their profits are likely to be big. So that says to me two things. Firstly, the tax question. And I should say that during the lockdown years, they made billions in losses, not profits, because nobody was buying the stuff. So there is a bit of balancing that takes place. But it does say to me that the windfall taxes, which come in and particularly will bite in 2023 at what is a 75% tax rate, which is high, because you've got your normal corporation tax, you've got your additional, and then you've got the supplementary tax on top. That is quite right. But secondly, it says to me that the way we calculate the price of electricity in this country, it is balmy. It has meant that artificially we pull up our own electricity prices by this complex formula. That needs to be reviewed as well. But what you can't do is suddenly say, well, that's the international price, and our guys who are international players, well, they're not allowed that international price. What we do is back home, we have an arrangement which at least means that we get, the residents of this country, get the benefit of that as well.
OK, thank you, Angela. Angela Knight there, former CEO of Energy UK. Right, my guests are still here. We're going to rattle through a few stories before the end of the show. Wood-burning stoves, René Vanderkamp. We can't pay our gas and electric. A lot of people this winter went and thought, oh, do you know what I'll get? I'll get a lovely wood-burning stove. They're going to ban them.
Guess who did that?
You did.
I did it in November, and let me tell you, I absolutely love it. And I was saying to Stephen in the break that actually the whole house feels different when the stove is on. I have it on every night. It's absolutely wonderful. It's my new hobby. And I've got hopefully a stove that they're happy with. But you know what, Bev? I have a couple of thoughts about this. Number one, no, just leave us alone. We've had enough. Number two, how are they going to police this?
Yes.
Are they going to break into my home to remove my wood-burning stove? Don't be ridiculous. This is ridiculous. It's noise that we don't need.
Isn't the idea as well that, of course, we'll have... you can keep your stove, but you'll have to burn something on it that the government approves in order to us not ending up in a kind of Dickensian
Well, we already have that.
landscape. But we do have to...
So in London, I have to buy smokeless coals and kiln-dried wood. So I already do that. And I think most people do. But you know what? When bills are so high, I live in a very old house that is almost impossible to heat. And this has made a major difference to me. And, no one's taking my wood-burning stove. And, let them come.
Oh, do you know what it will be, Stephen Pound? It will be the neighbours again.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Grassing people
the curtain
up.
twitches.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. I mean, I'm very involved in my local allotment association, and we actually get, when we're doing tree pollarding and cutting wood, we give the logs to people to cut them up and burn them.
I'm coming to your place.
But it's you're more than welcome at the Frankfield allotments. But it's interesting. As you walk through the streets, you can actually smell the smoke, and it's not a bad smell at all. But, I mean, I think the government does have a role, but I think we've done that. 1952, we had the great smog in London. It was dreadful, children were dying left, right and centre. You couldn't, buses, actually had people with a lantern in front of the buses because the smog was so...
We are not there.
No, but the government introduced smoke. It's like lead in petrol. They got rid of it. We've done it. We don't need to actually keep going back and reinventing it. But I think an Aga is my fantasy, is my dream. I've reached the stage of my life where my fantasies revolve around wood-burning four-oven stoves.
Absolutely. And you know what?
Tragic.
I have visions of a drone hovering over my chimney with a monitor on it.
Yeah.
But you get that anyway.
That's what it's going to be. You're absolutely right. That's how they'll do it.
I'm sure they'd go over your back garden anyway.
But talking about councils, local councils, getting things wrong... This is a local council, Lambeth Council. It's been forced to repay 1,000 motorists that it fined because the sign was basically considered to be illegible and confusing, and people were fined, and now they've claimed their money back. This is in Lambeth Council. As I say, the sign in question, I think we've got a picture of it. It's just another one of those cases, isn't it, where... The signage in these streets, it ties into our earlier story about the LTNs. It's very confusing and it's making a lot of money for the councils. I'm glad on this occasion they've had to give some of it back.
It is, and I'm quite interested in this because I got stung by this very scheme in Haringey, I think it probably was, and... it was a road that I'd driven down for 20 years without any problem at all. And suddenly they decided that you couldn't drive down it from 3 to 4 in the afternoon or 9 to 9:45. But the sign was just like this tiny little one that we have here in Balham. So when I get home, I'm going to write to Haringey and ask for my money back, Bev.
Yeah, well, this happened also to my mother in our area in West London, in Chiswick, not far from your neck of the woods, Stephen, where the sign was so confusing. They've given out so many fines, and my poor mother has been trying to pay this ticket that she accidentally got, and then she goes on the website, you can't pay it, you can't pay it, you can't pay it, but she can't speak to anybody, she can't get anything sorted. So I've now had to email the council and say, can you sort this out? It's so labour-intensive.
I agree. Look, there's a couple of different aspects. I mean, this is the Henry Cavendish School down in Balham, and as far as I can see, it was the location of the sign problem there. But look, when this all happened in the summer of 2021, when the Mayor of London suddenly said to councils, here's the money, start bringing in LTNs, start putting planters in the middle of the streets. And in the summer of 2021, everybody was doing it left, right and centre. Yeah. And what we did in Ealing was we actually put these things in, but we then asked everybody. And I think one area in Hanwell said, no, we actually want to keep it. We're really happy with it. So that stays. The problem here is it was introduced overnight without thinking. What you need to do is about 3 months minimum lead into this and put a sign up to this, the date that it's going to happen. You've got to do it properly. You've got to do it sensibly. And the other thing is there's still a misconception that the councillors can then trouser the money that they get for it. This is all ring-fenced for highway improvements anyway. So there's no incentive on the councils to try to screw people out of more and more money.
Oh, I'm not convinced by that, Stephen. I'm sorry. Because the evidence is there that they really are screwing people for more and more money. The roads are not getting better.
Spend it on anything except highway improvements.
Well, they're not spending it on highway improvements.
OK, right. On today's show, I've been asking you, with Rishi Sunak being our Prime Minister for 100 days today, does he deserve another 100 days in power? According to our Twitter poll, 73% of you say no, that he does not deserve 100 days in power. 27% of you saying yes, he does. We've come to the end of our show. Thank you so much, Stephen Pound, Dr. Renee Hoondekamp. Great to see you. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. I'm Bev Turner. I'll see you on Monday morning at 10. Have a great weekend.
Not another leadership contest.
Hello, Alex Deegan here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Most places dry today. Fairly cloudy out there. It is pretty mild, though. Temperatures in double figures for most. And there is some rain across northern Scotland from these weather fronts. High pressure is the dominant feature, but it is to the south, and we've got westerly winds, which are bringing some light rain and drizzle to parts of northwest England, the hills and mountains of West Wales as well. But the heaviest rain is certainly across northern Scotland. Quite gusty in places, but not as windy as yesterday for most, although the winds will pick up through this evening over northeast England and eastern Scotland. Most places pretty grey, but some breaks in the cloud, a hint of sunshine across parts of the east. And we will see those temperatures, as I said, double figures for most. We could get up to 13 Celsius in 1 or 2 spots. That rain will continue for a time this evening, but ease off across the Highlands and the Western Isles before midnight. That rain then pushes southwards as a kind of a weak band, just turning a bit damp for parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland through the early hours. Elsewhere, again, most places dry. It will turn a little colder across northern parts with some showers in Shetland and Orkney. Further south, a very mild start to Friday. And a similar day on Friday, actually. In the west, a lot of clouds and drizzle over the hills of Wales, a bit damp for northwest England to start with. We will see outbreaks of rain across western parts of Scotland. But brighter skies developing, perhaps across parts of East Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland. Most places just dry and cloudy. And again, temperatures getting up into the teens in 1 or 2 locations and widely up to double figures. Won't be as windy on Friday either. As we go through the evening, we'll see that rain just heading its way across the Northern Isles. Still some drizzle over western hills, but most places looking dry. And many places will be dry into Saturday too. Certainly for England and Wales, we will see some rain for a time crossing Scotland and Northern Ireland. Most places turning brighter on Sunday with some sunny spells, but also a little colder.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. A few minutes early for you today because coming up, yes, it's high noon. The Bank of England set to announce its decision on interest rates. The base rate expected to be pushed up another 0.5% to 4%. And of course, that means more pain for mortgage holders. But is all this medicine working in sorting out inflation in the economy? We'll be hearing from the bank governor, Andrew Bailey, about the prospects for Britain. And our very own Liam Halligan is also at the Bank of England to assess what the latest figures tell us. Also, 100 days on Rishi Sunak's premiership, has he managed to make his stamp on the top job, or is he still too busy firefighting? Of course, Dominic Raab's bullying allegations, the latest problem to dog number 10. Shell prompting anger after its core profits hit £68 billion, the highest in its 115-year history. But it points out it's already paying more than £1 billion in windfall taxes to the UK and the EU. But should we be squeezing the oil and gas giant even further? We'll get in touch on that particular topic and, of course, all the other views of the day at gbviews@gbnews.uk. So, as we said, high noon at the bank. We can actually cross now because our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, is there, Threadneedle Street, for us outside the Bank of England. And Liam, of course, we were suggesting that maybe they will have to go for an increase, perhaps even 0.5%, because they've got, a remit to get a grips on inflation.
Indeed, Mark. Just a year ago, interest rates were down well below 1%, but now they're up at 3.5%. We've seen 9 successive rate rises during 2022 as inflation has surged up to a 40-year high